Imagine being handed the keys to automotive perfection, then being told, make something better. That was the impossible task facing Jaguar in the 1970s. The E-Type had conquered the world with its breathtaking beauty and raw performance. Following it was like trying to paint a better Mona Lisa. Yet somehow, the car they created, the controversial, misunderstood XJ-S, would outsell its legendary predecessor and survive for an incredible 21 years. This is the story of a car that went from industry laughingstock to beloved icon. And what is it with the hyphen in the middle of the name? Why is it sometimes there and sometimes not? This is the Jaguar XJ-S/XJ-S story. The E-Type began production in 1961. 5 years later, Jaguar started thinking about what would replace it after they'd merged with BMC and felt they had the money to put towards such a project. It started with a reskin using a stretched E-Type 2+2 platform. E-Type stylist Malcolm Sayre would keep tweaking the design as a side project whilst producing the 1968 XJ-S. By 1967, he and the convertible were penciled into Jaguar's expanding future range. A range this large was never going to happen. First, because Jaguar lacked finances, and secondly, they were merging with the Leland Group, which meant those new cars were now competing with models from the same company, and that would never change. But the E-Type replacement was still a go, and by 1968 had been styled into this stunning small-scale mock-up by Oliver Blumenbach. Plans were to launch it by 1970. That date got delayed as the team shoehorned the V12 engine into something that appeared in 1971. But in any case, money and the new British leader was tight, and this E-Type replacement was based on an aging platform. Jaguar had this shiny new XJ saloon that was turning heads and winning reviewers over with how good it was to drive. Why not use a shortened XJ chassis? Thoughts of this had surfaced as early as 1968 and quickly gathered steam. The E-Type platform was out, and the XJ platform was in. The E-Type might look like it had low drag, but Jaguar wanted the new car to actually have low drag. But what it wouldn't have was a low bonnet. New crash and lighting laws would put paid to that. Like the previous car, there would be two models, a coupe and a roadster. The design would feature flying buttresses, marking a strong new styling direction. There were thoughts of badging it as the F-Type, but given the E-Type was known as the XJ in North America and the success of the Jaguar XJ launch, the new car would be known as the XJ-S. Jaguar was enamored with their new 5.3 LV12, and it would be the only engine offered in their new sports car. With fuel injection, the 285 horsepower, 212 kilowatts engine should give the car a similar 0 to 60 time as the E-Type, 6.8S. Like the E-Type, it would be allied to a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed Borg-Warner automatic. Jaguar were working on a 5-speed manual, but it was abandoned due to lack of funds. The V12 would be quite an experience, but it shouldn't drown out conversation. So the development team focused on sound deadening, even minimizing the number of entry points of the wiring loom between the engine bay and the interior. The E-Type already had its fair share of luxury with leather seats, an adjustable steering column, and an internally adjustable wing mirror. The XJ-S would offer even more. Where tinted glass, a radio, and air conditioning were an option on the old car, these would now be standard, along with an 8-track player in the US or cassette in Europe. Presumably sourced from the same place as the Princess, the dashboard grew a cluster of warning lamps, a laminated windscreen, and halogen headlights, apparently something no other car company had yet introduced. These were very innovative but up against US rules, so Americans would have to make do with 4-round headlights. There were other luxuries as well, like central locking, electric windows, and bumpers with energy-absorbing hydraulic struts that could fend off impacts up to 5 miles per hour, 8 kilometers per hour. Work on the coupe continued, but the roadster wouldn't make the cut. US legislators threatened to bring in rules banning open tops, and car companies shied away from new models. Those rules would never come to be, so in the late 70s and 80s there was a severe shortage of convertibles, and it would take until the late 80s with cars like the Mazda MX-5 that would be rectified. By 1972, the car's design was set in stone, but Jaguar would be hit with not one, but 2 disasters. The first was the oil crisis. Petrol jumped 400%, not ideal for a car with a 5.3L V12 engine. New speed limits reigned on any enjoyment you might get from a car that could go 150 miles per hour, 241 kilometers per hour. And given that, would parent British Leyland put much money behind marketing this albatross? And how much would that further impact sales? The second disaster was the collapse of British Leyland. They were forced to go cap in hand to the British government for a bailout and were nationalized to protect jobs and vehicle production from Britain's largest car company. This chaos must have surely caused no end of headaches for Jaguar in getting the XJ-S ready for production. To make matters worse, Jaguar were going through 3 chairmen in 2 years, and that probably didn't help, and weakened the influence that the luxury car maker had within British Leyland, which impacted their ability to push for increased support for their cars. The Jaguar XJ-S launched in September 1975. The design was radical. The flying buttresses were certainly a strong design choice. The press didn't like them, but they supposedly helped with the aerodynamics and stability, as well as torsional stiffness. This they may have done, but overall aerodynamics were barely better than the E-Type, even though Jaguar had made aerodynamics a key area to improve. Like the E-Type 2+2, it was a 4-seater, but only small people could fit in the back. This was a sports car after all. Performance was much more important than practicality. The interior didn't feature any wood or chrome, something that some customers felt was obligatory in a Jaguar. But then this was the mid-70s, where plastic and nylon carpets were something you would boast about in a brochure. Man-made materials were modern and progressive. The XJ-S was rapid. The V12 engine propelled it over 150 miles per hour, 241 kilometers per hour, something the E-Type could never quite manage. It got slightly better mileage as well, even though it was 316 kilograms, 700 pounds, heavier. That's about the weight of a vending machine. That meant acceleration suffered. Autocar Magazine's test in 1976 found that the E-Type could get to 60 in 6.4s, where the XJ-S only managed 6.9s. Still, that was nothing to sniff at in the mid-70s. It was about the same time as the new Lotus Esprit. The press loved the way it handled, not surprising as it used the XJ platform, shortened by 17 centimeters, 7 inch. It was a great car if you liked the looks. The car was known as the XJ-S with a hyphen, but that didn't stop Jaguar calling it the XJ-S without a hyphen in the UK brochure. It's almost like someone in the marketing team didn't get the memo. Jaguar's American brochures were also referring to it as the Jaguar S-Type, confusing as that was a completely different 1960s model. With fuel prices depressing demand for gas guzzlers, Jaguar didn't exactly expect E-Type level sales that had been over 4,500 in 1973, especially as the new car cost a lot more. They thought 3,000 per year would be more appropriate. And why not? The slower Mercedes 450 SLC was selling double that, and it cost even more. But there would be headwinds in selling this new car. The US had a blanket 55 miles per hour, 89 kilometers per hour speed limit, so where could you use all that power? Germany said the flying buttresses would limit visibility and refused to give type approval, meaning buying an XJ-S in Germany required more paperwork. So, it's not a surprise that Jaguar had problems hitting that sales goal. Maybe they should revisit those divisive looks. With some Italian flair? They worked with Bertone to produce the Ascot XJ-S concept car, note no hyphen, shown at the 1977 Geneva Motor Show. This was late 70s cutting-edge styling, angles and all, not 1960s styling. It also addressed 2 key weaknesses of the XJ-S, weight and practicality, with an aluminium body that boasted a hatchback. Pininfarina showed off their take on the XJ-S with the XJ Spider concept, built on one of the XJ-SS development platforms and shown at the British Motor Show in 1978. It seemed to be the spiritual successor to the E-Type, with several nods to the previous car. But despite a warm reception from the public, British Leyland didn't see the sense in making an update right now. Their limited funds were being plowed into replacing the 1950s Mini with the Austin Mini Metro. Back in the 1960s, Jaguar had been approached to use the E-Type for The Saint TV series starring Roger Moore. Jaguar passed, and the Saint drove a Volvo P1800. The show was a wild success, and Jaguar regretted their mistake. So, when the Saint was revived in the late 70s, Jaguar wasted no time in making sure Simon Templar drove an XJ-S. Models of Jaguar's car proved more popular than the TV series that only lasted 1 year. As the Saint knew, the XJ-S was a very fast vehicle. So fast that it captured the record for the official Cannonball Run in 1979 at 32 hours 51 minutes. That's going across the USA at an average speed, including stops of 87 miles per hour, 140 kilometers per hour. The 4-speed manual had never been popular, and after selling only 352 cars, it was withdrawn from sale in 1979. What's more, the XJ-S was getting hit with the general British Leyland issue of crappy design and build quality. The car was manufactured on out-of-date equipment that had worked better when it was new in the 1950s. The fuel injection system would cut out in the summer because it was mounted to the hottest part of the car. In 6 years, Jaguar had sold 14,800 cars. That's 2,500 a year, not the 3,000 goal. And sales weren't going in the right direction either. In 1981, fewer than 1,300 were sold. With demand so low, the late 70s chaotic strike action at Jaguar and their suppliers didn't create a big problem for the XJ-S. In fact, sales were so slow Jaguar actually stopped production in 1981 for a full half year so that the backlog could be sold off, and there were serious thoughts of ending production completely. Management at British Leyland relented and instead gave the car a light facelift and engine improvements. Jaguar fans got their wood and leather liberally sprinkled all over the dashboard, along with a new steering wheel. But the main changes were to the engine. The new model was touted as the XJ-S He standing for high efficiency. Jaguar had found ways to improve fuel efficiency whilst maintaining brisk acceleration. They also improved the handling and used fatter rear wheels for more traction. When combined with a lower price and better build quality, the public liked what they saw and sales started to turn around. In 1982, it was jumping past Jaguar's initial 3,000 sales goal. A year later, they sold nearly 5,000, the best year ever. The bump in sales was also probably due to their success on the racetrack. More on that later, and also further updates. In 1983, there was a new transmission, the 3.6L 6-cylinder allied to a 5-speed manual. Although it wasn't a favorite of motor journalists, it was faster to 60 than the V12 automatic and had slightly better fuel economy. The car was still known as the XJ-S with a hyphen, but the hyphen on the back of the car had been shortened so it was easy to read it as the XJ-S without a hyphen. Companies like Lynx had been offering cabriolet versions to some success. With US convertible laws now firmly in the rear view mirror, Jaguar launched their own version of an open top as the Jaguar XJ-S. It allowed us to finally see what the XJ-S would look like without the flying buttresses, but it wasn't a proper open top and it meant no more rear seats. At first, only the 6-cylinder was available. The V12 arrived in 1985. The SC seemed perfect for those endless Californian summers and just what Americans had been waiting for, except they'd have to continue waiting as it wasn't exported there for 3 years. With XJ-S sales blossoming, Jaguar thought of offering a Daimler version. If you're confused why Jaguar has the Daimler name, when surely it should belong to Mercedes-Benz, that's a story for another time. But long story short, Jaguar could use the Daimler name in the old British Empire region, and it was used as Jaguar's luxury brand. Unlike the XJ-S, which had been coupe without flying buttresses, maybe it never saw the light of day because it didn't work alongside Daimler's limousines. In those dark days in 1980, when XJ-S sales were in the toilet, the light for the old E-Type hadn't been extinguished. In fact, almost as soon as production ended, people were yearning for an Encore, an F-Type, a pure sports car, not the grand tour that was the XJ-S. Sketches for something similar to the 1978 Alpina XJ Spider were used and approved by British Leyland's management. Like the XJ Spider had obvious E-Type design traits. The low bonnet meant pop-up headlights, no bad thing. It would be based on the new XJ47, presumably shortened like the XJ-S. And like the XJ40, it used Jaguar's new 6-cylinder engine. Jaguar's American dealers had started to complain. To appease them, U.S. coach builder Hess and Eisenhart were asked to produce a proper convertible until Jaguar could produce something better. This they duly did from 1986 until 1988, when Jaguar launched the XJ-S V12 convertible, produced in collaboration with Karmann. It had taken 21 years for the original convertible vision to finally make it to production. The public loved the new look, and the XJ-S got another bump in sales. 11,207 cars were sold in 1989 alone, and more than half of these were V12 open tops with a good, fat profit margin. It didn't hurt that the XJ-S had been racking up win after win throughout the 1980s thanks to Tom Walkinshaw Racing, TWR, and besting cars like the BMW 635 CSI. TWR offered a list of parts to turn your XJ-S into something closer to the one you'd seen race and win on Sunday. To cash in on the success, Jaguar Sport released the XJ-S in 1988. The body kit was supposed to make it more aerodynamic, but Jaguar was short on just how much better it was. The handling was improved, but there was almost no change to the transmission, and it still used an automatic. Maybe all the brochures' talk of the finest leather and carpets belied the true intentions of this car. It was really just something luxurious and exclusive. Maybe Jaguar realized this. In 1989, the engine was bored out to 6.0L, delivering a 6.5s 0 to 60 time and a 158 miles per hour, 253 kilometers per hour top speed. That gave it the power to beat a Porsche 928 GT and a Ferrari Mondial. All this in a car that had cruise control, power-assisted steering, electrically adjustable and heated door mirrors, ABS, heated front seats, and a trip computer. Of course, Jaguar were still having problems getting the name of their car right, managing to get both XJ-S with a hyphen and XJ-S without a hyphen on the front page of the same brochure. The XJ-S was for the enthusiastic adult driver, but what about their kids? The XJ-S Jr. launched in 1989, a half-scale replica. This car must surely be Jaguar's first EV, as it was powered by a 24V motor, allowing it to get up to the crazy speed of 12 miles per hour, 19 kilometers per hour. There were headlights, taillights, indicators, fog lamps, reversing lamps, leather seats, and a radio cassette with stereo speakers. The perfect way to spoil your children and ruin them for life. Things seemed to be going well for Jaguar with fat profits on cars that they developed years ago. That was until the owners came back to the dealership with a laundry list of problems. Jaguar was still making these cars on ancient machinery. The attention to detail might be better than the 70s, but it wasn't a patch on its rivals by the late 1980s. Jaguar was in poor financial health and needed a partner to help them develop new cars. They found it in Ford, who bought Jaguar at the end of 1989. The 1990s would mean, hopefully, a replacement for the XJ-S that was by now 15 years old. And Jaguar already had a car ready to go, remember, the F-Type they'd been designing since 1980. It had morphed in a full XJ-S replacement and had already been announced it would launch in 1990. But the car was in development hell, being endlessly tweaked to make it more competitive with a new generation of rivals. It got a turbo. It got four-wheel drive. It needed a better crash structure to comply with new safety rules. Being based on an aging platform, it was falling behind. Maybe Ford could get the F-Type across the finish line? The American carmaker did a thorough review of Jaguar's projects. The F-Type would take until 1994 until it could be launched, and it was overweight with poor internal space. The axe fell. The F-Type was the first of a long line of cars that hoped to do the seemingly unattainable, improve on the E-Type. At least elements of the design were used for the Aston Martin DB7. That left the XJ-S to soldier on for a few more years, so an update was rushed through for 1991. The main change was finally removing that hyphen in the XJ-S name. Well, okay, they did more than that. The six-cylinder was expanded to 4.0L. Whilst that got it more power, the V12 got less due to emissions rules. And that meant that both cars now had a very similar maximum speed, and the six-cylinder, with its 5-speed manual, was still faster to 60 miles per hour. The rear window had a larger look. The rear light cluster changed to be lower and wider. Inside, there were a lot of changes like electrically adjustable seats, and it looked more modern. The XJ-S was dragged into the 1990s with the option of a CD player. Surprisingly, for such a powerful yet expensive car, the driver's airbag was an optional extra. The V12 got one last hurrah. Its capacity was increased to 6.0 L, topping out at 161 miles per hour, 259 kilometers per hour. That's over the informal gentleman's agreement between German car makers in the 1980s, limiting the top speed of their cars to 155 miles per hour, 250 kilometers per hour. But that was an agreement underdog Jaguar was never going to agree to. But despite this update, the six-cylinder was just too good, and even in the USA, interest in the V12 waned to a point that it became a special order option. The big changes were in how the car was manufactured, and that presumably allowed it to become a 2+2 convertible for the first time. Ford made sure the XJ-S was more reliable, cheaper, and easier to produce, to help pay for its upgrade that surely must happen soon. It was sorely needed. The glory days of racetrack wins and shiny new convertibles were in the past. The XJ-S was going up against the Mercedes SL, BMW 8 Series, and Lexus SC, cars far more modern than the 1970s XJ-S. When it came to the next generation XJ-S, Ford didn't have a bottomless pit of money. They were hard at work updating the ancient factory and producing new saloons like the upcoming S-Type. So, although work on the XJ-S replacement began in 1992, it would be built on the existing XJ-S platform, itself based on the 1968 Jaguar XJ. The XJ-S ended production in 1996 after selling a little over 115,000 cars. That's about 5,500 per year, which was similar to E-Type sales and a lot better than the 3,000 per year Jaguar estimated when it launched. But the E-Type was being sold at a time when a lot fewer people were buying premium cars. The XJ-S replacement launched in 1996 as the XK8. It's tempting to put the E-Type on a pedestal and think that Jaguar should have based the XJ-S on that and not the XJ. The E-Type might look good, but the XJ platform was better, and it helped that both of Jaguar's cars in the 70s and 80s were based on the same platform, so any improvements could be applied to both of them. The red telephone box wasn't popular when it first appeared in the 1920s. When it disappeared, it was mourned. Likewise, the public might have been put off by the XJ-S looks when it launched, but they got used to it and even loved it, flying buttresses and all, over the 21 years it was on sale. But it wasn't an E-Type, a car that increasingly gathered mythic status and became a benchmark that every future Jaguar sports car would be measured by. But the XJ-S did one thing well. It helped to keep the lights on at Jaguar during the dark days of the 70s and 80s.